The thing about power is that most people mistake it for invincibility. Sung Min-jun made that mistake exactly once in his life, and it happened on a Tuesday night at Noir, the most expensive restaurant in Las Vegas, while a black waitress in a simple uniform looked him directly in the eye and said the words that would change everything. But let me back up. Sung Min-jun controlled half of Las Vegas's underground economy. Korean American, 34 years old, heir to an empire his father built from nothing in the 1980s when Korean immigrants were carving out territory in a city that belonged to the Italians and the Russians. The Jun family specialized in what Vegas did best, making money disappear and reappear cleaner than it started. Casino skimming, high-stakes gambling operations, luxury car smuggling, and enough legitimate real estate to make the criminal enterprises look like rounding errors. He wore Tom Ford suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, drove a Bugatti that was one of 7 in the world, and had never been told no by anyone who understood what saying no to Sung Min-jun actually meant. Until Ayanna Gibson. She was 29, worked the dinner shift at Noir 4 nights a week, and had the kind of beauty that made men stupid. Warm brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a professional bun, eyes that seemed to see straight through whatever performance you were giving. She moved through the restaurant with efficient grace, took orders with polite professionalism, and had somehow lasted 6 months in a place where the staff turnover was measured in weeks. Sung Min noticed her immediately. Not because she was beautiful, Vegas had beautiful women the way other cities had traffic. But because she was the only server in the entire restaurant who looked at him like he was just another customer. No deference. No fear. No recognition of who he was. It was novel, intriguing, and completely unacceptable. So on that Tuesday night, after an excellent meal and a bottle of wine that cost $4,000, Sung Min did what powerful men do when they want something. He asked for it. "I'd like your number," he said as Ayanna brought the check. She looked at him with those penetrating eyes, and something like amusement flickered across her face. "No thank you," she said politely. Sung Min blinked. Around him, his security detail tensed. His dinner companion, a city councilman on the payroll, looked like he'd just witnessed a traffic accident. "I'm sorry?" Sung Min said, genuinely confused. "I said no thank you." Ayanna set down the check presenter. "Is there anything else I can get for you this evening? Do you know who I am?" "Yes." She smiled, and it was professional, pleasant, and completely unmoved by the implied threat. "You're Mr. Jun. You own the building we're standing in, 3 casinos on the Strip, and probably enough of this city to make my refusal inconvenient for me. But I still don't date men who can't protect themselves." The silence that followed was absolute. Sung Min stared at her, processing what she'd just said. His security detail looked ready to intervene. The councilman was sweating. And Ayanna Gibson just stood there, completely calm, waiting for his response like she'd commented on the weather. "Can't protect myself," Sung Min repeated slowly. "That's right." Ayanna glanced at his security detail, 4 men, all armed, all positioned around the table in textbook protective formation. A man who needs 4 bodyguards to eat dinner isn't someone I'd trust to handle a relationship. No offense. Then she walked away, moving to her next table like she hadn't just insulted one of the most dangerous men in Las Vegas. Sung Min sat there, stunned, watching her work. And for the first time in years, he felt something other than boredom. He felt curiosity, challenge, and something that might have been respect. What Sung Min-jun didn't know, what nobody in that restaurant knew, was that Ayanna Gibson had spent the previous 8 years as a Level 6 close protection specialist for Sentinel Security Group, the private military contractor that protected heads of state, billionaire CEOs, and people whose deaths would destabilize governments. She'd trained with Israeli Mossad, British SAS, and American Secret Service. She'd protected a Saudi prince through 3 assassination attempts, kept a tech billionaire alive during a kidnapping in Manila, and once took down 4 armed attackers in a Johannesburg hotel using only a dinner fork and tactical timing. She'd left the industry 6 months ago after her last principal died anyway, not from external threats, but from the heart attack that comes from treating bodyguards like furniture instead of human beings who were risking their lives daily. Now she waited tables in Vegas, saved money, and tried to figure out what purpose looked like when you were too good at violence to go back to normal life but too tired of death to keep doing it professionally. And she absolutely was not interested in dating a crime boss who needed 4 bodyguards to feel safe at dinner. But fate, as they say, has a sense of humor. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment below where you're watching from. Trust me, this story is just getting started. Sung Min-jun did not accept rejection gracefully. Not because he was cruel or petty, but because rejection simply didn't happen in his world. When you controlled enough of Las Vegas to make people's problems disappear, or make the people themselves disappear, rejection became a theoretical concept rather than a practical experience. So when Ayanna Gibson refused to give him her number, Sung Min did what any rational crime boss would do. He became obsessed. Not in a dangerous stalker way. In a strategic, methodical, I need to understand this anomaly way. He had his people pull her employment records, clean, no red flags, started at Noir 6 months ago with excellent references from previous restaurant jobs in Miami. Background check came back unremarkable, no criminal record, no outstanding debts, no obvious vulnerabilities. She was, by all accounts, exactly what she appeared to be, a waitress. Except waitresses didn't look at Sung Min-jun like he was mildly amusing. And they definitely didn't comment on his security arrangements with the casual assessment of someone who understood tactical protection protocols. She said, "I can't protect myself," Sung Min said to his head of security, David Chen, the next morning in his office at the Meridian Hotel and Casino. David, former Army Ranger and the most competent person Sung Min had ever hired, looked uncomfortable. "Boss, she was probably just making an assessment based on observation." Sung Min pulled up security footage from Noir on his computer. "Look at this. When she approaches our table, she clocks all 4 security positions within 3 seconds. Watch her eyes." David leaned in, studying the footage. And his expression changed. "She's counting threats," David said slowly. "And evaluating response times based on positioning." "Exactly." Sung Min replayed the moment. "She's not intimidated because she's already assessed the situation and determined she's not in danger. Which means either she's insane, or she knows something we don't. Want me to dig deeper?" "No." Sung Min closed the laptop. "I want you to invite her to consult on our security protocols." David blinked. "What?" "She said I can't protect myself. I want her to explain what she means. Hire her as a consultant. Generous day rate, tell her we're reviewing security procedures and want an outside perspective." Sung Min smiled. "If she's just a waitress with opinions, she'll decline or give us generic advice. If she's something else, she'll show us exactly how much she knows." "And if she's law enforcement? FBI, undercover operation? Then we learn that too." Sung Min stood, straightening his brioni suit. "Either way, I want to know who Ayanna Gibson really is." 3 days later, Ayanna stood in Sung Min's office, wearing the same server uniform from Noir, looking at the security assessment contract on his desk like it was a mildly interesting menu. "You want me to evaluate your security protocols," she said. "Yes." Sung Min sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, watching her with the focused intensity he usually reserved for business negotiations. "You made an observation about my inability to protect myself. I'd like you to elaborate." "For $50,000. Ayanna read the contract terms. "That's a very expensive ego repair, Mr. June. Consider it a consulting fee for expertise." "What makes you think I have expertise?" "The way you counted my security details' response times without moving your eyes. The way you positioned yourself at exactly 47 degrees from my table, optimal angle to see threats from both the kitchen and main entrance. The way you assessed David here as the primary threat within 2 seconds of entering this office. Sungmin leaned forward. You're not a waitress. Or you weren't always one. So who are you, Ayanna Gibson? The office went quiet. David's hand drifted closer to his weapon, subtle, professional. Outside, Las Vegas glittered in the afternoon sun, oblivious. Ayanna looked at Sungmin for a long moment, then smiled, a real smile, not the professional mask she wore at Noir. I'm someone who used to keep people like you alive for a living, she said. And I got very good at it before I quit. She picked up a pen, signed the contract, and slid it back across the desk. You have 73 security vulnerabilities in this building alone. Your personal protection detail is competent but predictable. And whoever designed your safe room deserves to be fired because it's a death trap pretending to be protection. She checked her watch. I can have a full assessment ready in 72 hours. Do you want the polite version or the version that might hurt your feelings? Sungmin felt that unfamiliar sensation again, the one that might have been respect mixed with genuine interest. Hurt my feelings, he said. I'll survive. We'll see. Ayanna stood. I start tomorrow. 6 a.m. Bring comfortable shoes, we're walking every inch of this property. And Mr. June? Tell your security detail to stop following me home from work. It's sloppy, and they're not as subtle as they think. She left before Sungmin could respond. David waited until the door closed. Boss, she made us. All 4 surveillance teams. I know. Sungmin was already smiling. Interesting, isn't it? She's either the best consultant we've ever hired or the most dangerous person to ever walk into this office. Probably both. Sungmin pulled up her contract. Find out everything about Sentinel Security Group. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with. The assessment took 5 days, not 3. Ayanna moved through Sungmin's empire with the systematic efficiency of someone conducting a military operation. She walked every floor of the Meridian, tested every lock, timed every elevator, interviewed security personnel, reviewed camera coverage, and identified vulnerabilities that had existed for years without anyone noticing. On day 2, she pointed out that the executive elevator could be disabled from the parking garage using nothing but a maintenance key, which meant anyone with building access could trap Sungmin on the top floor. On day 3, she demonstrated how the supposedly bulletproof windows in his office could be compromised using specific resonant frequencies. Basically, the right sound equipment could shatter his protection without firing a shot. On day 4, she showed David Chen how his security rotations followed a predictable pattern that anyone watching for 48 hours could exploit to create a 6-minute window of reduced coverage in the main lobby. By day 5, Sungmin's entire security apparatus was simultaneously impressed and humiliated. You're good at this, Sungmin said, watching Ayanna compile her final report in the conference room. I was trained by people who get fired if their principals die. Ayanna didn't look up from her laptop. Your security team is competent. But they're designed to deter opportunistic threats, not sophisticated ones. Anyone with real training could get to you. Could you? Already did. Twice. Sungmin went very still. Explain. Ayanna pulled up security footage. Day 2, 3:47 p.m. I was in your office for 11 minutes while you were in a meeting downstairs. Sat at your desk, read your emails, could have planted bugs or worse. No one noticed. She pulled up more footage. Day 4, 6:23 a.m. I accessed your personal residence, the penthouse 3 floors up. Walked through your bedroom, your office, your kitchen. Left before you woke up. Zero detection. David Chen looked like he might be sick. Sungmin felt something between anger and admiration. You broke into my home. I walked into your home. Your security code is your father's birthday backwards, sentimental and predictable. Your biometric scanner can be bypassed with commercially available gel film. And your guard rotation assumes threats come from outside the building, not from someone already inside with credentials. Ayana finally looked at him. You're vulnerable, Mr. June. Not because your security is incompetent, but because you've gotten comfortable. Comfortable gets people killed. She slid a USB drive across the table. Full assessment, recommendations, and a redesigned security protocol that would actually protect you instead of making you feel protected. Implementation will cost about $3 million and require you to change your entire operational security mindset. And if I don't implement it? Then eventually someone smarter than your current threats will figure out what I figured out, and you'll die in your office or your bed or your car, and your empire will collapse into a succession war that destroys everything your father built. Ayana stood. But that's your choice. My contract is complete. Transfer the consulting fee to the account listed, and we're done. She walked to the door, and Sungmin found himself not wanting her to leave. Wait, he said. Ayana paused, hand on the doorframe. Have dinner with me, Sungmin said. Not as a client. Not as a consultant. Just, dinner. I told you. I don't date men who can't protect themselves. You just spent 5 days proving I can't. Sungmin stood, walking around the desk. So teach me. Show me how someone like you operates. Be my personal security consultant, not for the building, for me. Full-time position, name your salary. I don't want to be a bodyguard anymore. Then don't be. Be my partner. Help me redesign not just security, but how I move through the world. You said I've gotten comfortable, make me uncomfortable. Make me better. He stopped a few feet from her. And maybe along the way, I'll prove I can protect myself well enough to earn your number. Ayana studied his face, and Sungmin could almost see her calculating, threat assessment, risk analysis, decision trees playing out in real time behind those intelligent eyes. 6 months, she said finally. Contract position, full operational authority over your personal security. You follow my protocols without question. You don't override my decisions. And if you prove you can handle yourself without a small army. She smiled slightly. Then maybe we'll talk about dinner. Deal. Sungmin extended his hand. Ayana shook it, her grip firm and professional. We start tomorrow. 5 a.m. And Mr. June? I hope you're ready to be humiliated repeatedly, because the first thing we're fixing is your complete lack of personal combat training. She left, and David Chen stared at his boss with something like awe. You just hired the woman who broke into your house to be your personal security consultant. I hired the most competent person I've ever met to keep me alive and make me better. Sungmin was already reviewing the USB drive contents. And David? I want full background on Sentinel Security Group by tomorrow. If Ayana Gibson learned from them, I want to know everything about how they operate. On it, boss. Sungmin read through Ayana's security assessment, and with each page, his respect grew. She hadn't just identified vulnerabilities, she'd understood his entire operational pattern, predicted how he'd respond to threats, and designed countermeasures that accounted for his personality, his business needs, and his risk tolerance. She'd seen him completely. Not the performance, not the reputation, but the actual person beneath the power. And for the first time in years, Sungmin Jun felt like someone had looked at him and decided he was worth the effort to improve. The humiliation began at 5:07 a.m. in a private gym 3 blocks from the Meridian. Ayana arrived in tactical pants and a compression shirt, her hair in tight braids, carrying a duffel bag that clinked ominously. Sungmin showed up in expensive athletic wear that had never seen actual athletics, accompanied by David Chen. He stays, Ayana said, pointing at David. You're training alone. If you can't handle yourself without backup, you haven't learned anything. David left. The gym door locked. And for the next 90 minutes, Ayana systematically destroyed every assumption Sungmin had about his own capabilities. You telegraph every movement 3 seconds before you make it, she said, effortlessly deflecting his attempted strikes. Your weight distribution is wrong. Your breathing is panicked. And you're trying to overpower me instead of using technique. Sungmin threw a punch. Ayana redirected it, used his momentum against him, and he was on the floor before he understood what happened. Again, she said. He got up. Tried a different approach. Ended up on the floor. Again. 47 times over 90 minutes, Sungmin ended up on the training mat, sweating, frustrated, and slowly beginning to understand the vast difference between theoretical knowledge and practical skill. You're not hopeless, Ayana said as they finished. You're just untrained. Your instincts are decent. Your execution is terrible. We'll fix that. How long? Sungmin asked, breathing hard. To not embarrass yourself in a fight? 3 months. To actually handle a real threat? 6 months. To reach my level? She smiled. Years. Maybe never. But we're not trying to make you an operator. We're trying to make you competent enough to survive the 30 seconds it takes for actual help to arrive. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. 5 a.m., combat training. Ayana taught him Krav Maga, Filipino martial arts, tactical shooting, threat assessment, situational awareness. She was a brutal instructor, demanding, uncompromising, utterly unwilling to accept excuses. 8 a.m., security briefings. They reviewed his daily schedule, identified vulnerabilities, adjusted routes and timing to be unpredictable. Ayana replaced his predictable routine with controlled chaos, different cars, different routes, different patterns that made him a harder target. Noon. Operational improvements. They redesigned his security protocols, retrained his personnel, implemented the $3 million upgrades she'd recommended. Sungmin watched his empire's defenses transform from adequate to exceptional. 6 p.m., debriefs. They reviewed the day's threats, attempted security breaches, surveillance attempts, the constant low-level violence that came with controlling criminal infrastructure. Ayana taught him to see patterns, anticipate moves, think like the people trying to kill him. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Sungmin stopped being the comfortable crime boss who relied on reputation and started becoming someone who could actually survive on skill. But something else was happening too. The more time they spent together, the more the professional boundaries blurred. Combat training became conversations about philosophy. Why they'd both chosen violence as a profession, what it cost, whether redemption was possible. Security briefings turned into debates about power, responsibility, the difference between strength and cruelty. Sungmin learned that Ayana had grown up in foster care in Detroit, joined the army at 18 because it offered structure and purpose, discovered she had a gift for protection work, and spent 8 years keeping terrible people alive because the money was good and the alternative was going back to having nothing. Ayana learned that Sungmin's father had built the June Empire through strategic brutality, that Sungmin had inherited it at 26 when his father was murdered, and that he'd spent 8 years trying to be worthy of a legacy he'd never asked for while secretly wondering if there was more to life than just accumulating power. They were, in their own ways, both survivors trying to figure out what came after survival. Why did you really quit? Sungmin asked one morning after particularly brutal training. They were sitting on the gym floor, both exhausted, sharing water and the comfortable silence that comes from shared suffering. My last principal died, Ayana said. Heart attack. 63 years old, billionaire tech founder, spent his whole life building something amazing and then dropped dead in his office while I stood outside the door. She was quiet for a moment. I'd spent 3 years keeping him alive from external threats. Assassination attempts, kidnapping risks, corporate espionage. But I couldn't protect him from himself, the stress, the terrible diet, the refusal to see doctors because he was too busy. And when he died, his family blamed me. Said I should have made him take better care of himself. That wasn't your job. Wasn't it? Ayana looked at him. I was responsible for his safety. But I defined safety too narrowly. Just physical threats. I should have been protecting him from everything, including his own worst habits. You can't control other people's choices. No. But I can choose who I protect and why. She stood, offering him a hand up. That's why I waited tables for 6 months. I was trying to figure out if protection work still mattered to me, or if I'd just been good at something I didn't actually believe in anymore. Sungmin took her hand, let her pull him to his feet. And what did you figure out? That I miss it. Not the industry, not the corporate bodyguard culture. But the actual work, keeping people alive, seeing threats before they materialize, being the reason someone makes it home safely. She smiled. That's why I took your contract. I wanted to see if I still cared. Turns out I do. Even when the person you're protecting is a criminal? Especially then. Ayana gathered her training gear. Good people have lots of protection options. Government agencies, private security, legal systems. Bad people? They're more interesting. They need protection, but they also need to become less bad. That's a challenge worth taking. Is that what you're doing? Making me less bad? I'm making you more aware. What you do with that awareness is up to you. She headed for the door, then paused. But for what it's worth, Sungmin, you're already less comfortable than when I met you. Discomfort is the first step toward growth. Left alone in the gym, Sungmin realized something uncomfortable himself. He was falling for her. Not the surface attraction he'd felt initially, but something deeper, respect, admiration, the recognition of someone who saw his flaws and decided he was worth improving anyway. And he had no idea what to do about it. Month 4 brought the first real test. Sungmin was having dinner at a legitimate restaurant. Not noir, somewhere public and unremarkable, part of Ayana's protocol to avoid predictable patterns, when 3 men entered with obvious intent. Russian mob. Sungmin recognized the leader, Alexei Volkov, enforcer for the Bratva operations that had been encroaching on June territory for months. This was a message, a challenge, maybe the opening move in a territory war. Sungmin's first instinct was to signal his security detail. But Ayana was across the restaurant, watching him with those assessing eyes, and he realized this was a test. Could he protect himself? He stood as Alexei approached, his body language open but his weight distributed the way Ayana had taught him, ready to move, balanced, no telegraphing. Sungmin Jun, Alexei said in heavily accented English. We need to talk about respect. Happy to talk. Here or somewhere private? Sungmin kept his voice calm, non-threatening. Ayana's training. De-escalate when possible, establish dominance only when necessary. Here is fine. You've been expanding into businesses that belong to my organization. That's disrespectful. I've been operating my legitimate holdings. If they overlap with yours, perhaps we should discuss territorial agreements like civilized businessmen. Alexei smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Or perhaps you should be taught a lesson about respecting your betters. His hand moved toward his jacket. Maybe for a weapon, maybe just for intimidation. In that split second, Sungmin had to decide, trust his training or call for backup. He moved. Not attacking. Redirecting. He stepped inside Alexei's reach, his hand intercepting the jacket movement with a grip that looked casual but controlled the Russian's elbow joint, Ayana's technique for restraining without escalating. I respect capable people, Sungmin said quietly, maintaining the hold. But I don't respond well to threats. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down, we're going to have a civilized conversation about territorial boundaries, and we're both going to leave here with our reputations intact. Or this gets ugly for everyone, and neither of us wants that. Alexei stared at him, surprised that Sungmin had moved first, assessing whether to escalate. Then Ayana was there, not intervening, just present, her body language relaxed but her eyes locked on Alexei's backup men. Gentlemen, she said pleasantly. The restaurant has excellent wine. Why don't we all sit down and discuss this like professionals? The atmosphere shifted. Alexei recognized calculation when he saw it. This wasn't a fight he could win cleanly. And Sungmin's willingness to engage physically instead of hiding behind security had changed the power dynamic. "Fine," Alexei said. "We talk." 30 minutes later, they had a territorial agreement. The Russians would stay out of Sungmin's casino operations. Sungmin would stop expanding into their smuggling routes. Everyone saved face, avoided bloodshed, and established a détente that was worth more than any violent confrontation. When they left, Ayana walked beside Sungmin to his car. "You handled yourself," she said. "I didn't panic. You controlled the situation without backup. That's growth." She smiled, genuine, proud. "4 months ago, you would have let your security detail handle that. Today, you handled it yourself. Because you taught me. Because you were willing to learn." They reached his car, and Ayana stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Sungmin, I need to tell you something." "What?" "My contract ends in 2 months. I've been thinking about what comes next." Sungmin's chest tightened. "Stay. Extended contract, permanent position, whatever you want. It's not about the job." Ayana looked at him directly. "I've spent 6 years being professional, maintaining boundaries, never getting personally involved with principals. It's the first rule of protection work, don't blur the lines. But somewhere in the last 4 months, I stopped seeing you as a principal and started seeing you as..." She hesitated, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. "As someone I care about. As someone who worked to become better instead of staying comfortable. As someone worth more than just a professional relationship." Sungmin's heart was hammering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you were right to ask for my number. Just 4 months too early." Ayana smiled. "You've proven you can protect yourself. Now I want to see if you're worth dating." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe leading to yes if you don't screw this up." She stepped closer. "Take me to dinner. Somewhere you choose, not somewhere I've security cleared. Show me who Sungmin Jun is when he's not being a crime boss or a student. Just be yourself." "What if myself isn't impressive? Then I'll know you're not worth my time." "But I don't think that's going to be a problem." She kissed his cheek, brief, warm, full of promise. "Pick me up Friday. 8 p.m. And Sungmin? Don't bring security. This is about trusting yourself, not your team." She left him standing there, touching his cheek where she'd kissed him, feeling like he'd just won something more valuable than any territory or deal. Friday arrived with complications. Sungmin had planned everything perfectly: reservation at an intimate French restaurant, a gift, tasteful jewelry, not too extravagant, even practiced conversation topics that didn't involve crime or security protocols. He was nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first business negotiation at 26. Then at 3 p.m., David Chen burst into his office with an expression that meant serious trouble. "Boss, we have a problem. The Volkovs are moving against us. Coordinated attacks on 3 of our operations. And they're targeting you specifically." Sungmin felt ice in his veins. "Explain." David pulled up intelligence reports. "After your meeting with Alexei last week, the Russians agreed to territorial boundaries. But it was a setup. They were buying time to position for a decapitation strike. Kill you, throw our organization into chaos, absorb our operations during the succession fight." "When?" "Tonight. They tracked your dinner reservation somehow. They're planning a hit at the restaurant, multiple shooters, professional crew, designed to look like a random robbery gone wrong." Sungmin's mind raced. Cancel the dinner, lock down security, go to war with the Russians. That was the smart play. The safe play. But it was also exactly the comfortable choice Ayana had spent 4 months training him to avoid. "What's our response capability?" he asked. "Full security team, tactical support, we can turn that restaurant into a fortress." But boss, David hesitated. Ayana doesn't know. She's not on tonight's security detail because you said this was personal, not professional. Which meant if Sungmin showed up with a full security team, he'd break the trust Ayana had extended. She'd asked him to trust himself, not his team. But if he went alone, he was walking into an ambush that could get them both killed. Comfortable versus competent. Safety versus growth. Sungmin made his decision. Call Ayana. Tell her there's a credible threat against tonight's dinner. Give her full tactical details. Then let her decide how to handle it. Boss, she's not operational anymore. She's a consultant, not. She's the most competent person I know. And this is her area of expertise. Sungmin was already pulling up building schematics for the restaurant. I trust her assessment more than ours. Make the call. 20 minutes later, Ayana walked into Sungmin's office wearing tactical pants and a serious expression. You're still going to dinner, she said. No question, a statement. Yes. Even knowing the Russians are planning to kill you. Especially knowing that. Sungmin stood. Because canceling would mean they've already won. They'd know they can control me through fear. Every dinner, every meeting, every movement for the rest of my life would be constrained by the threat of violence. That's not living. That's just slow death. Ayana studied him. You've learned well. But you're still an idiot. Probably. Are you going to try to stop me? No. She pulled out her phone, started texting rapidly. I'm going to make sure you survive it. Change of plans, we're not canceling dinner. We're using it as bait to eliminate the Russian threat permanently. Explain. The Volkovs want a decapitation strike. We give them one, except we control every variable. We turn their ambush into our ambush. We let them commit to the attack, then we neutralize them completely. Ayana was in full operational mode now, and Sungmin realized he was seeing the real her, not the waitress, not the consultant, but the elite protection specialist who'd kept people alive in war zones. You said you were done with this work, Sungmin said. I said I was done protecting people who didn't appreciate it. You appreciate it. You've worked to become worth protecting. That's different. She looked at him directly. Plus, I really want that dinner. And I'm not letting Russian mobsters ruin our first date. Over the next 4 hours, Ayana orchestrated something beautiful. She coordinated with Sungmin's security team, but repositioned them as secondary support, not primary protection. She contacted 3 former Sentinel colleagues who happened to be in Vegas and hired them as backup, people she trusted absolutely. She reviewed the restaurant's layout and identified 12 positions the Russians could use for an attack, then planted countermeasures at each one. Most importantly, she taught Sungmin the plan. We're going to dinner exactly as scheduled, she explained. The Russians will make their move, probably between the appetizer and main course, when we're relaxed and distracted. When shooting starts, you're going to do exactly what I've trained you to do: assess, move, neutralize. You mean fight back? I mean survive first, fight back second. Your job is to get yourself and me to the safe extraction point I've designated. My job is to make sure the Russians regret choosing violence. She checked her weapons, 2 pistols, concealed knives, and something that looked like a taser but probably wasn't. This is going to be dangerous, Sungmin. Are you sure you want to do this? He thought about the last 4 months. Everything Ayana had taught him about competence over comfort, growth over safety. He thought about spending the rest of his life making decisions from fear versus making them from strength. I'm sure, he said. Let's go to dinner. The restaurant was perfect, intimate lighting, excellent wine, the kind of atmosphere that should have been romantic instead of tactical. Sungmin and Ayana sat at a table near the back, positioned exactly where Ayana's planning had dictated: maximum visibility, controlled sight lines, proximity to 2 exits. To any observer, they looked like an attractive couple on a first date. Which they were. just with the added complication of imminent violence. So, Ayana said, sipping wine that probably cost more than her weekly waitress salary used to be. Tell me something I don't know about you. I'm terrified right now, Sungmin admitted. Of the Russians? Of screwing this up. The date, I mean. I've been planning what to say for 3 days. Ayana smiled. That's actually endearing. What did you plan to say? That you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. That you've changed how I see everything. Power, safety, what it means to actually live instead of just survive. That 4 months ago I wanted your number because you were beautiful, but now I want it because you're, you. Capable and brilliant and completely unwilling to accept less than my best effort. That's a pretty good speech. I practiced in the mirror. I know. Your penthouse has cameras, remember? I watched the footage. Ayana's eyes sparkled with amusement. You rehearsed 17 times. Sungmin laughed. Actually laughed, despite the knowledge that killers were positioning themselves around the restaurant. You're never going to let me have dignity, are you? Dignity is overrated. Competence is sexy. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. And for what it's worth, you're doing fine. Better than fine. The appetizers arrived. Sungmin noticed Ayana's eyes tracking the waiter's movement, cataloging the 2 men who'd entered the restaurant 3 minutes ago, the couple near the window who weren't actually eating, just watching. How many? He asked quietly. 5 confirmed. Possibly 6 if there's overwatch outside. The couple by the window are spotters. The 2 at the bar are shooters. There's probably someone in the kitchen. Ayana kept her voice casual, like they were discussing the weather. They'll wait until we're committed to the main course. Classic timing, target is relaxed, focused on conversation, not expecting violence. What do? We enjoy our dinner. We have our first date. And when they make their move, we show them why threatening us was the worst decision they ever made. She squeezed his hand. Trust your training, Sungmin, trust yourself. And most importantly, trust me. The main course arrived at 9:17 p.m. At 9:23 p.m., the shooting started. It happened fast, the way violence always does. One of the men from the bar stood, weapon clearing his jacket, aimed at Sungmin's head. Ayana moved first, her wine glass thrown with perfect accuracy, hitting the shooter's wrist just as he fired. The shot went wide, shattering a decorative mirror. Then chaos. Sungmin did exactly what Ayana had trained him to do: assess, move, neutralize. He flipped their table forward for cover, pulled Ayana down beside him, his body positioning exactly as she'd taught, protecting vital organs, maintaining mobility, eyes tracking threats. The second shooter opened fire from the kitchen entrance. Ayana returned fire, 3 shots, precise, professional. The shooter went down. Move. Ayana commanded. They moved together, Sungmin following her lead, using the chaos and panicked diners as cover. Ayana had drilled this exact scenario dozens of times. How to move through a restaurant under fire, where to position, how to use environment as weapon and shield. The couple by the window drew weapons. Ayana had anticipated this, one of her sentinel colleagues was positioned outside. Through the window, Sungmin saw muzzle flashes, saw both spotters go down before they could acquire targets. Kitchen exit, Ayana said, her voice calm despite the violence. 30 seconds. They moved. But the last shooter, the one Ayana had predicted would be in the kitchen, emerged with a submachine gun, spraying bullets without precision or care. Sungmin felt time slow. He saw the shooter's position, saw the angle, saw exactly what Ayana had taught him about reading combat situations. The shooter was panicked, not trained, dangerous but beatable. He moved without thinking, using a serving cart as mobile cover, closing distance the way Ayana had drilled into him. The shooter saw him coming, tried to adjust aim, but Sungmin was already inside his firing arc, using the same elbow control technique he'd used on Alexei, redirecting the weapon, stripping it with the disarming sequence Ayana had made him practice 200 times. The submachine gun clattered to the floor. The shooter stared at Sungmin with shock. "You're done," Sungmin said, and struck, precise, controlled, the way Ayana had taught him. The shooter dropped. Ayana was beside him instantly, securing the weapon, her eyes scanning for additional threats. "Clear. My team has the perimeter. Police response in approximately 4 minutes. We need to move." They exited through the kitchen, into an alley where one of Ayana's sentinel colleagues waited with a vehicle. Within 90 seconds they were blocks away, sirens approaching the restaurant behind them. In the back seat, adrenaline crashing, Sungmin looked at Ayana. "I protected myself," he said. "You protected both of us." Ayana was checking him for injuries, professional, thorough, her hands gentle. "You did everything right. Stayed calm, followed training, adapted to threats. You survived a professional hit squad, Sungmin. That's not luck. That's skill. You taught me. I gave you tools. You used them." She finished her check, confirmed he was unharmed, then kissed him, urgent, intense, full of relief and adrenaline and something deeper. "God, you're infuriating. Who walks into an ambush on a first date? Someone trying to impress you." Sungmin kissed her back, months of tension and respect and growing affection compressed into that moment. "Did it work? You disarmed a shooter with a technique I taught you 3 months ago." "Yes, it worked." Ayana pulled back slightly. "But our dinner got interrupted." "Rain check?" "Definitely. Somewhere without Russian mobsters next time. I'll make sure of it." The Russian problem ended within 48 hours. With the failed assassination attempt giving Sungmin legal and practical justification, he moved against the Volkov organization with surgical precision. Not a war, Ayana had taught him better than that. Targeted actions, seized assets, exposed operations to law enforcement, leveraged connections to deport key personnel, applied pressure until the Russian mob leadership decided Vegas wasn't worth the cost. Alexei Volkov himself reached out to negotiate. "You've changed," Alexei said during their meeting, this time in Sungmin's office, properly neutral ground, with Ayana present as security consultant. 4 months ago, you were soft. Now, you are dangerous." "I learned from the best," Sungmin replied, glancing at Ayana. "Then we have terms. We leave Vegas. You leave us alone. Territory is yours." "Agreed. With one addition, you tell everyone in your network what happened. That Sungmin Jun doesn't hide behind security anymore. That he handles his own problems." Alexei smiled grimly. "Reputation is built on blood. You have earned yours." The Russians withdrew from Vegas within a week. And Sungmin's empire shifted, not larger, but different. Word spread that the Korean crime boss had survived a professional hit by fighting back personally. Respect in the criminal underworld wasn't about money or territory. It was about capability. And Sungmin had proven his. But more importantly, something had changed between him and Ayana. "So," she said one morning after training, they still met at 5 a.m., though now it was partnership rather than instruction. "My contract officially ended yesterday." Sungmin felt his chest tighten. "I know. I've been thinking about what comes next. Stay. Permanent position, whatever you want. I'll pay." "Sungmin." Ayana stopped him with a hand on his arm. "I don't want to be your employee. I don't want to be your consultant. I want to be your partner. Equal. Not working for you, working with you." "What does that mean?" "It means we build something together. You run your operations, legitimate and otherwise. I handle security and protection work, but on my terms, for people I choose. We support each other, trust each other, grow together." She looked at him directly. "And we try this relationship thing properly. Not as boss and consultant, but as equals who respect each other's capabilities. You want to date a crime boss. I want to date Sung Min-jun, who happens to run criminal operations, but who's working to become better. Who learned to protect himself instead of just relying on power. Who walked into an ambush to prove a point about not living in fear. She smiled. You're still a criminal. I'm still former private security with questionable ethics. We're both complicated people trying to figure out what goodness looks like when traditional morality doesn't quite fit. But I think we can figure it out together. Sung-min pulled her closer. Equal partners? Equal partners. You don't override my security decisions. I don't override your operational decisions. We trust each other's expertise and make important choices together. What about the fact that I'm in love with you and have been for approximately 3 months? Ayana's eyes widened slightly. That's direct. You taught me not to waste time on comfortable lies. So here's the uncomfortable truth. I love you, Ayana Gibson. I love your competence, your unwillingness to accept mediocrity, the way you see potential in people and force them to become better. I love that you threw a wine glass at an assassin and then kissed me in the getaway car. I love that you made me earn your respect instead of just taking it for granted. That's a pretty good speech. I didn't practice this one. I can tell. You said approximately 3 months like you're doing math. But Ayana was smiling, genuine, warm, vulnerable. I love you too. Even though you're infuriating, occasionally reckless, and still have terrible taste in office furniture. My furniture is. She kissed him, and the argument dissolved into something better. Months of professional distance finally collapsing into the relationship they'd both been building toward. When they broke apart, Ayana pulled out her phone. What are you doing? Sung-min asked. Giving you my number. You've earned it. She typed on her phone, and Sung-min's buzzed with a message. Finally, he said. It only took 6 months, a complete security overhaul, surviving an assassination attempt, and proving you could protect yourself. Ayana gathered her training gear. But you did it. You went from a comfortable crime boss who couldn't defend himself to a capable partner who can handle threats without panic. That's growth, Sung-min. Because you taught me. Because you were willing to learn. That's the difference. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Sung-min? Now that we're dating officially, I have some thoughts about reorganizing your entire operational structure to reduce risk and increase efficiency. Of course you do. We start tomorrow. I'm thinking we transition more of your operations to legitimate businesses, reduce the criminal exposure, build something sustainable instead of just profitable. She smiled. Unless you want to stay comfortable? I'm never going to be comfortable again, am I? Not as long as I'm around. But you'll be better. Stronger. More capable. Ayana blew him a kiss. See you tonight. And Sung-min? Pick somewhere nice for dinner. Somewhere without Russian mobsters this time. She left, and Sung-min stood alone in the gym, looking at her number in his phone, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for safety or comfort, but for growth. For becoming someone worth the effort Ayana was investing. For building a life with someone who saw his flaws and decided he was worth improving anyway. He texted her, 8 p.m. I know a place. No Russians, no ambushes. Just us. Her response came immediately, perfect. And Sung-min? I'm proud of you. You've come a long way from the man who couldn't protect himself. Sung-min smiled, saved her number, and went to prepare for a future he was finally capable of protecting. Noir Restaurant, exactly 1 year after Ayana Gibson had refused to give a crime boss her number. Except now she sat across from Sung Min-jun at the best table, wearing an elegant dress that suggested success, her natural hair styled beautifully, looking like someone who'd found exactly where she belonged. So, Sung-min said, raising his wine glass. 1 year. How does it feel? Exhausting. Rewarding. Occasionally terrifying when you make decisions without consulting me first. Ayana clinked her glass against his. But good. Really good. In the year since becoming partners, they'd transformed both their lives. Sung Min had transitioned 60% of his operations to legitimate businesses, still profitable, significantly less risky, building something sustainable. The remaining criminal infrastructure was smaller, more controlled, operating with the kind of precision Ayana's security protocols demanded. Ayana had started her own private security consulting firm, handling select clients who met her ethical standards, people trying to become better, not just people with money. She'd reconnected with former Sentinel colleagues, built a network of elite protection specialists, created something that mattered. Together, they'd built a partnership that worked. Professional respect, personal love, the kind of relationship that made both of them stronger than they'd been alone. I have something for you, Sung Min said, pulling out a small box. Ayana raised an eyebrow. If that's an engagement ring, we've talked about this. I'm not ready for. It's not a ring. Open it. Inside was a key, simple, unremarkable, attached to a small card. What is this? Ayana asked. Key to the new security training facility I'm building. State-of-the-art equipment, tactical ranges, everything you'd need to train the next generation of protection specialists properly. Sung Min smiled. I bought the property last month. Construction starts in 2 weeks. It's yours, full ownership, my investment, your vision. Ayana stared at the key, her eyes suddenly wet. Sung Min. You taught me that being comfortable was the same as being dead. You showed me that growth requires investment, risk, commitment to becoming better. So I'm investing in your vision, training people properly, building competence instead of just selling security theater. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Equal partners, remember? I support your dreams the same way you support mine. This is. Ayana couldn't quite finish the sentence. What you deserve. What you've earned. What you've taught me is possible when people commit to actually growing instead of just surviving. She stood, walked around the table, and kissed him. Right there in the restaurant where they'd first met, in front of staff who remembered the waitress who'd refused the crime boss's advances. I love you, she said. Even when you make grand gestures without consulting me first. I love you too. Even when you reorganize my entire life without asking permission. They sat back down, and Ayana looked at the key like it was the most valuable thing she'd ever been given. So, Sung Min said. Now that I've proven I can protect myself, handle threats, and support your dreams, does that mean I finally earned your number? Ayana laughed. You earned it 6 months ago. Now you're earning something better. What's that? A future. With someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. Who pushes you to be better while accepting who you are. Who loves the man you've become while believing in the man you're still becoming. She squeezed his hand. That's worth more than any number, Sung Min. And in that moment, in a restaurant where a crime boss had once been rejected by a waitress who saw straight through his performance, 2 people who'd taught each other how to grow celebrated the life they'd built together. Not perfect. Not safe. But real. And absolutely worth the effort. Love wins when respect comes first. When you see someone not for their appearance or their status, but for their potential to become better. When you're willing to do the hard work of growth instead of accepting comfort. Sung Min Jun learned that from a waitress who turned out to be the most dangerous and capable person he'd ever met. Ayana Gibson learned it from a crime boss who was willing to be humiliated, trained, and transformed to prove he was worth her time. They built something together, partnership, respect, love that made both of them stronger. If you loved this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections and the power of choosing growth over comfort. Comment below, would you work with someone who mocked you if they proved they could change? Let me know, I love hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most dangerous people are often the ones you underestimate. But the best people are the ones who push you to become more than you thought possible. Until next time. Sparkles.